Here are some ELA terms that you've heard before, but that will also be coming up in today's lesson. Sensory details. Details about sight, sound, taste, smell, and touch that help paint a picture in the reader's mind. We also call this imagery. Onomatopoeia is when words resemble the sound they describe. For example, buzz, swish, giggle, crank. Theme is an author's message about life or human nature. Setting is where and when a story takes place. Alliteration is the repetition of consonant sounds. And personification is assigning human qualities to non-human things. Hello! Today we'll be looking more closely at a poem, and in particular, its sensory details.
Friendly reminder, sensory details are details about sight, sound, taste, smell, and touch that help paint a picture in the reader's minds and tap into our emotions.
For example, in How Much Longer from our previous lesson, I noticed some great sound details like dragging slow, the dishwasher clinks its finished clink. Love that onomatopoeia.
We're going to model what we want you to do when you analyze a poem using Afternoon Beach, and you will practice with another poem coming later. Our objective for this lesson is that you will be able to identify sensory details within a poem and discuss in writing how these details contribute to its theme.
And when I'm analyzing a text, I always want to preview the questions first. So here are the questions we'll be thinking about as we read. 1. After analyzing the poem for sensory details, what do you think is the author's message? Choose one line from the poem to support your thinking. 2. What do we learn about the writer's identity from this poem? What do you think was in their heart map, if they made one? 3. What do the sensory details in the poem suggest about time and place, setting? Bonus, share any other lines or words that moved you and explain why.
Let's begin with a reading of the poem. Afternoon Beach. We weren't just wearing towels for fun. Home is hot. The family fries until we summon the energy to pull on stretchy suits, grab towels, and pile into the car, which is an oven. We drive until a roar of waves taunts us from a parking lot. On the beach, sand and sun blaze hot, but welcome breezes play with my hair until I pull it back, away from their grasp. I shed shorts and shirt and sprint to the water. I push my way out against crashing waves and dive into pure, cool, salty pleasure. Silence. Silence until I surface. The roar of ocean fills my ears. I stand, wipe salt from my eyes, and dive through a wave, then ride the next as it races to shore. I get knocked flat, float over more waves, let them push me, pull me, take me wherever they want to go. I dive over, under, through. I lose the time. And suddenly, I've lost the time. We need to leave. I stagger onto the fiery sand and wait for my land legs to return. My hair is salty, my skin is sticky as I survey my crashing waves, my ocean sky, my blue beneath blue. By Molly Jordan. So now we're going to talk about what we noticed about this poem. Typically, as readers of poetry, we would read through the poem a second time, but your teachers have already read this poem many times, so we are going to keep moving.
All right, so now that we have the poem in front of us, we want you to remember that you should be using the steps for annotation that we taught you earlier this year. When it's time for you to do it with your poem, the one coming later, you'll see that the steps are already listed for you on the page. In order to annotate, we want you to use the highlight tool and the comment tool.
All right, so Ms. Sullivan, please tell us what you noticed in the first portion of this poem.
So the first sensory detail that I notice is the feeling of heat. We see it clearly in the first line, home is hot. And then again in the second line where the author tells us that the family fries. When I think of fries, I think of a few different things. Obviously, first thing that comes to mind is French fries, sizzling in a fryer-liter. And then I think of, an egg frying in a pan, or I think of sunburned skin frying and sizzling. So I get the sense of heat. We also see that the car is an oven, which communicates to me also that it's very hot, right? And I think also of, when you get into the car on a very hot day and maybe the seat burns your legs or the seatbelt burns your hand as you try to buckle in. We also see the roar of waves, so I can hear that very loudly, that powerful roaring sound. And then I also see a little bit of personification there with the waves as they taunt the author from the parking lot. But then you can see the heat start to be released with the welcome breezes, which to me feel much calmer and cooler. And this idea of welcoming, pulling the reader in again, and the author. And then there's some fun alliteration there at the end of lines 20 to 22. I shed shorts and shirt and sprint to the water. I just love that. It's so playful and fun as I picture the author running to the sea.
Thank you, Miss Sullivan. This rainy weekend is getting warmer already. Ms. Graham, how about that second portion of the poem?
Well, in the second portion of the poem, we can hear the crashing waves just hitting the sand. And I'm noticing the salty taste and the cool feeling as the narrator gets into the water. And then if you look, the way the words look on the page from lines 25 to 31 just remind me of how the ocean like crashes into the beach and then pulls back. And so it's that like concrete feeling of the poem right there. And then as the author gets in the water, she says silence. And that word silence, it stands alone on the page, and I can feel the silence, almost like the pause from the poems we were talking about in the previous lesson. And if you've ever had your head under the water, even though the ocean is so loud and powerful, it is really like a calming feeling underneath the water, like almost everything's blocked out, almost kind of eerily quiet. And then, pow, she hits us with the roar again as soon as the speaker emerges from the water. Another onomatopoeia.
Thank you, Ms. Graham. And Ms. Nevers, tell us what you noticed about the next few lines.
Well, I loved in line 40 how the author chose to write dive through a wave as one word. And even though this isn't necessarily a sensory detail, this spoke to me because I felt like those words being crunched all together almost mimicked a wave slapping the speaker in the face. And similarly, later in lines 46 and 47, with the push me and pull me, this evokes that feeling again of being tossed in the waves. And those descriptive direction words of under, over, through help me picture and feel that movement of the ocean.
Yes. And as I wrote in the comment above, when you're describing how you're picturing in your head, I was thinking of that great ELA term, imagery, that often is associated with sensory details.
Absolutely.
All right. So in this last section, I'm gonna talk and type to the best of my ability. The first word that stands out to me is fiery. And then some of the awesome adjectives that come after that, like salty and sticky. So I'm vividly picturing Molly Jordan, thanks Miss Graham for jumping in there, walking to the car after a day at the beach. That feeling of you've been in the ocean all day and now you're hot and sticky and it's time to go and you're maybe not feeling so cool anymore. And then she ends the poem with this calming image, this landscape of the ocean blue and the sky blue. And I'm really picturing this one scene of them all mixing together. And it really contrasts for me the beginning of the poem with the hot car, this calm blue feeling at the end. And then also the beginning of this stanza when she's talking about that word fiery, and just kind of ends there with that calming image.
Before we move forward with our analysis, we want to review our notes for sensory details because even though we noticed all these great moves Molly Jordan was making, we know the focus of this assignment is on sensory details. So we'll review and highlight them now.
All right, so I left a lot of comments. What are some ones that we're noticing that kind of give us helped with our senses?
I would say in that first section that Miss Sullivan talked about, like the feeling of touch is highlighted with the words like hot and oven and fry. And then the feeling of sound is highlighted with the roar of the waves.
Yes, definitely.
And we had a lot of feelings of that pushing and pulling throughout, and the cool water.
I can taste salt as well. I think we see salt there. And for me, whenever I'm at the ocean and I'm swimming, I always taste the salt and like it lingers kind of on your lips after you swim. So that to me is a really vivid sensory detail.
I would also say I can feel the breeze playing with my hair. So that for me was a really vivid sense of touch.
And then silence, the sensory detail of hearing or not hearing when we compare that to the roar.
And as I already mentioned too, those feelings at the end. Shh. My dog wants to go to the beach.
We all do.
The salty and the sticky feeling that Miss Sullivan was just talking about, of the salt on your face or on your body, and just that stickiness of when you get out of the ocean and you've got the sunscreen and the sun and everything going on as you've ended your beach day.
Okay. We ready to move on to the questions?
I
think we are.
All right, so let's take a few moments and answer the questions using our annotations as a guide. Let's start with question 1. After analyzing sensory details, what do you think is the author's message? Choose one line from the poem to support your thinking. So I just want to take a moment here to remind you that when we're reading poetry, there are always multiple ways to interpret meaning. So we're not looking for a specific right answer. Just look at your annotations and your observations about the poem and let that guide you. So, Miss Nevers, what do you think is the author's message?
I mean, this might not seem that deep, but I think the author is trying to convey how beach days are the best. And when I'm thinking about theme in particular, I think the heart of this poem is about seeking relief on those hot summer days. There's a sense of fun and whimsy, but also a sense of peace. And I'm thinking also about how the places we frequent are so tied to our emotions. The speaker talks about this beach almost as if it's her own. And even though we know that there are so many others on the same beach, there's something about it that belongs to her. If you look in the final lines of the poem, she says, "As I survey my crashing waves, my ocean sky, my blue beneath blue," that repetition of "my" suggests to me that the speaker really does feel that the beach is hers and that the experiences on that beach belong to her alone.
All right, awesome. So let's take a look at question number 2. What do we learn about the writer's identity from this poem? What do we think was in her heart map or their heart map if they made one? Miss Graham, what are your thoughts on this question?
Well, Miss Sullivan, you're so awesome for asking me that. You all know she's just awesome overall, right? Back to business. I've learned that the speaker has a family and they go places together. So her heart map would probably list the names of her family and some of the places that they've traveled. She lives somewhere where for at least part of the year it is hot and her home is hot. So she doesn't have a great AC system and she can swim probably pretty well. She loves the water and lives driving distance from the ocean. I bet her heart map, she would have lots of things relating to the beach, special memories, maybe something about swim team, family activities that they did down at the beach. And then that line where they pile into the car at the very beginning suggests to me that there's probably siblings or more than just her and one or two parents, because when you pile into the backseat of the car, you are not getting in alone.
Thank you, Miss Graham. Now let's take a moment to reflect on question 3. What do the sensory details in the poem suggest about time and place, setting? What do you think, Miss Moeller?
Well, after a close reading of this poem and highlighting and annotating and discussing all these elements with my esteemed ELA colleagues, I'm going to go back to the title and take a guess that this is the beach in the afternoon. Seriously, though, the sensory details about the sun blazing hot further illustrated that this was the afternoon, probably when the sun is highest in the sky. And then all the details that we've already discussed before now about the sand and the ocean and the contrast between the car and the ocean and the water, ocean water and the breeze really helped me picture the setting.
Great. Thank you, Miss Moeller, and thanks for calling us esteemed. And drum roll, please, the bonus question. Would anyone like to share any other line or words that moved you? I'll take this one. For me, I was really moved by the lines 32 through 37 that Miss Graham talked about earlier, where the author describes the silence of the ocean around her while she's under the surface, in contrast to the chaos when her head is above water. So it brought me back to my childhood trips to the ocean and the quiet moments of calm and such a powerful force of nature. And I just think, that's such a wonderful thing, is that connection that we can find when someone shares a landmark of theirs, and then it reminds us of one of our own. So we have posted a discussion question on Google Classroom. Feel free to chime in with your favorite line from the poem and what you liked about it.
We know this was a long session, but we're excited to see you model these same moves with another poem called You Can't Write a Poem About McDonald's. Spoiler, you can. Written by Ronald, no joke, Wallace.
So please follow the posted instructions and don't forget to read the poem twice. If possible, all of your ELA work for this week, your heart map and your analysis of the McDonald's poem, should be completed by Sunday, because you'll be getting new lessons starting next Monday. And as always, feel free to reach out to your ELA teachers with any questions. Good luck!
Good luck!